Um, okay, well, I thought I was going after Laura, but that's totally... Oh, another Nick. Sorry, apologize. We're drowning in Nicks.
Wait a second, we're gonna like get the sound happening.
Thank you.
Just give us a second, Nick. I think we can hear you now, if you want to try.
You're talking to me.
Yes. Yes, we're talking to you. You're on.
Okay, sorry. So Laura's going after me. I'm a bit confused about the schedule here. So I'm now. Okay, no problem. Okay, well, I'd like to first of all subscribe to Mo's conviction about the importance of the blockchain. That's a definite tidal element behind, I think, the reason everyone's here. Certainly, it's a conviction on my part that's makes this a crucial topic to talk about. So I've got two little elements that I've picked up about what's going on here in advance, which is this title, The Spatial Politics of the Blockchain, and a blurb saying that we're talking here about the triangular relation between decentralized technology, architecture, and the office form. So I hope that I don't leave the orbit of these agenda items. I'll probably be approaching them from a somewhat abstracted point of view. And what I really want to talk about is space-time and succession. And leading into it with three chained questions. And the first one comes, they're sort of ordered, hopefully, in a series of descending triviality. So the first one is the most trivial, apparently, but I think it's actually has more content than it might seem. And when we're asking what is Bitcoin, and this is something I don't know how immersed in this everyone is at this event. I'm probably going to a certain level of immersion, but I'm sure, other people very happy to go into more expository mode if that's helpful at some stage about how this actually works. But it's very helpful that Satoshi Nakamoto's paper is structured as a definition, because the paper is called Bitcoin, a peer-to-peer electronic cash system. Now, I think all those elements extremely merit extraordinary excavation, and there's a lot going on there. I won't be digging into all of those. I want to just, for this first question, just stick with the very first word, the indefinite article. A peer-to-peer cash system, electronic cash system. And that, weirdly, is an element that people might think has dated more than the rest since 2009. Because a huge argument that's racking the world of cryptocurrency in general, Bitcoin in particular at the moment, is the extent to which Bitcoin is the blockchain. And this is a question that isn't a philosophical question in a straightforward sense. It's a historical question. It's a technical question. It's an economic question. It's a question about whether the intrinsic dynamics of Bitcoin are such that it will produce the network effects necessarily to actually produce a definite article blockchain, the blockchain. So are we talking about the blockchain or blockchains, with each one being a blockchain? Um, I'm going to move on immediately to my second question. This one becomes acute by the fact that now it's almost 4 o'clock in Shanghai, and one of the close synonyms for space-time is obviously time zones. So we're in different time zones, and if we transfer this question about the definite article into this particular area or moment, it makes a difference between the question, what is time? A grandiose traditional philosophical question, and what is the time? Which seems to be practical, relatively trivial. Again, it's one that we're dealing with. It's certainly one I've had to deal with to make sure I'm here at the right time. So just by adding the definite article between these two phrases, between these two little questions, you actually produce the entire rift of ontological difference. The whole of critique is there. You know, between what is time and what is the time is the difference between time as such, the being of time, and what is the time, a fact, a moment, an empirical element. So this slight modification, this slight insertion opens actually this gigantic rupture. And the element of time that is going to carry on through this, the actual core definition of time, is succession. And succession, we know immediately, is relevant to what we're doing because it's a translation almost directly of the chain in blockchain. What the chain in the blockchain is a succession of blocks. And my third little question, now actually getting now massively grandiose actually, before introducing the space-time question, is to ask about the coincidence between 5 terms, and I think the way we order terms, and in particular the way we think relations of coincidence or succession between these terms, is going to structure explicitly or implicitly the kind of political questions and grand theoretical questions about what the blockchain is, where we are, what it might do, what we want it to do. So these 5 terms, which, as I say, I think everyone is going to disagree about the ordering of these things, and in that disagreement of ordering, or as I say, particularly coincidence and non-coincidence, is going to be the whole of our political economic space. So there's 5 terms: capitalism, globalization, modernity, critique, and throwing it in for Mo's Skynet, artificial intelligence. A huge range of options there is available. What the one, I think, pole position is to argue for the extreme coincidence of those 5 terms. They're basically the same thing, being seen from different aspects. But then particular political and ideological projects emerge when people try to desynchronize them. And so one might be tempted to argue for modernity to capitalism, a capitalism after modernity, a post-globalization that is still part of modernity, modernity after critique, or the whole variation and set of permutations that are available there. And organizing all of those things or terminologically fixing them, is what we do with the post prefix. You know, if we want to immediately fix our agenda and give it some definite form, a form that's kind of particularly susceptible to being carried by political excitement or by fashion, you attach a post prefix to it. Post-modernity being one that we've already encountered a lot. Implicitly, I think also post-critique, or as we'd be more familiar with that, post-Kantianism. And I'm not going to obsess here on the philosophical issue. It's something that I'm very willing to follow up if people want to talk about it. But the argument that I want to make is the blockchain makes it impossible to be a post-Kantian. This is a kind of shocking, from a philosophical point, I think a shocking outcome. And again, from the philosophical point of view, it makes the blockchain something of immense importance. So let me just try and give some grounds for why I might say that. Kant deals with space and time in very sort of complicated ways, especially time slips around and does a whole bunch of different things. So this is a nutshell version of it, but I think it's sort of historically relevant to the way things have developed, which really focuses on what Kant calls the transcendental aesthetic, his basic argument about the two forms of space and time. And he defines space in terms of geometry. That's to say, he thinks that geometry formalizes the necessary structure of space and shows us in doing that space is actually a subjective structure that is imposed upon the world. And similarly, arithmetic, again dominated by succession, is the same in relation to time as geometry is to space. And the difference between geometry and arithmetic is the formal mathematical definition of the difference between space and time. Now, the reason why I think it's become a general syndrome for people to think that post-Kantianism is not only possible but almost mandatory, and something that is so inevitable that it fades into the sort of intellectual background of our culture, is the fact that the transcendental aesthetic, as Kant set it out, comes to seem implausible. And it comes to seem implausible, first of all, because Kant seems to take Euclid's parallel postulate as if it were an axiom. That's to say, he assumes that the geometry that Euclid laid out was a timeless, necessary structure of geometrical understanding. And obviously, in the modern period, the parallel postulate comes under question. People play around with different versions, different geometries based on varying the parallel postulate. And this seems to suggest that Kant simply can't be trusted to tell us what is necessary in these basic forms of sensibility. But an even more devastating challenge takes place with the construction of space-time. And space-time is, as everyone knows, huge. I mean, Einstein is used as an icon of a kind of ultimate modern cultural possibility that at least reflects, if not in some more fundamental way, driving trends towards relativization, a collapse of a certain modernist optimism, maybe as a sort of doorway, therefore, into post-modernity. And there's a reference that I'd really like to introduce here, a book that I think is very widely and justifiably respected, and I think makes a massive contribution to this, which is by Peter Galison. It's called Einstein's Clocks, Poincaré's Maps, Empires of Time. It's a truly excellent book. And what Galison argues there is that Poincaré was dealing with exactly the same historical problem that Einstein was dealing with, but dealing with it in a way that was inflected through a certain series of bureaucratic and administrative practical concerns that were not primary for Einstein, but were totally converging upon the same set of real issues, which were inescapable issues of, again, I come back to these 5 terms. They were inescapable issues of capitalism and globalization and modernity, which is to say, why he in his title he talks about the empires of time. In France, where Poincaré is obviously working, there is a hugely distributed global imperial apparatus that is wanting to standardize time for just purely practical reasons. And in doing so, it comes across, again, extremely practical questions. If you've got 2 clocks in different parts of the empire or widely distributed in space, and you're trying to actually establish that they are both synchronized, you have an extremely intricate technical question, because any signal that you send from one clock to another clock to check whether they're actually keeping time properly is itself going to take time. Even if, obviously, in the electrical age, you're sending signals at approximately light speed, you still have a time lag. And this problem, on this extremely just straightforward technical bureaucratic level of making sure that your clocks are telling the same time, that you have achieved actual practical time standardization, is Einstein's problem seen from another facet. Gallison's point is you're not dealing with 2 different issues here, you're dealing with the same issue. Exactly. And Einstein, as the sort of abstract physicist, is very happy to see it as a problem of physics, a problem of speculative theory. Poincaré is never willing to abandon that problem as a practical administrative problem. And Gallison says this is why we know Einstein as the great theorist of space-time, and Poincaré is seen as somehow having missed the ball, somehow failed to quite reach the proper level of abstraction on this problem. And in failing to reach this level, sorry, was that?
Yeah, I was wondering. I mean, you've been speaking a lot about time, and I was hoping that you might. We need to move on to Laura quite soon. So I was wondering if you might be able to kind of bring this back to, let's say, to space quite quickly, and then we can move on, and then we can kind of continue this discussion. And
I'll bring it. I'll wrap it up quickly. Okay. The blockchain solves the problem of space-time. The problem of space-time is that, according to Einstein, and the notion of space-time says there is no such thing as absolute succession. Therefore, there is not even time in any distinctive sense, distinct from a dimension. That's why space-time is treated as a 4-dimensional structure. Or dimensions are both geometrically treated as equivalent. This is in the theorization of the blockchain. The problem is approached through something called the Byzantine general problem. And the Byzantine general problem is exactly the same as the problem of relativistic spacetime. Let me just quote from Satoshi Nakamoto responding to a question by James A. Donald on the cryptography mailing list, where a lot of the blockchain theory was put together. He says, every general, this is in the Byzantine general's problem, just by verifying the difficulty of the proof of work chain, can estimate how much parallel CPU power per hour was expended on it, and see that it must have required the majority of the computers to produce that much proof of work in the allotted time. Then a little ellipsis. The proof of work chain is how all the synchronization, distributed database, and global view problems you've asked about are solved. And these problems, synchronization, distributed database, and global view problems, they are the problems that relativistic spacetime says are impossible to solve. Relativistic spacetime is the theory that these problems are insoluble, and instead of a solution to these problems, you have general relativity. So the claim here, we probably don't have time. I won't try to justify it further than just saying this is the claim being made. But the claim being made here is that the blockchain is post-spacetime, and that means that we are not post-Kantian. We're not post-Kantian because the Kantian transcendental aesthetic is not disrupted by Einstein-Minkowski spacetime. Instead, it is the draft, it is the blueprint, it is the precursor for the spacetime of the blockchain, which has now been instantiated by the Bitcoin technology. So we have now artificial absolute time for the first time ever in human history. And this, therefore, is scrambling these narratives. It's scrambling our sense of pre and post. What is the actual set of successions in the most concrete sense we're dealing with? So sorry, I apologize if I've overstretched my time limits, and I'll stop there.
No worries.